All right, it's been a while. Scott and I, my man over here, my genius man over here, mathematician, and I have been working on our own analytics, and we're going to break down what it is. I really do think it's a good job. I really appreciate Scott's help. He's been a co-partner through this whole thing. And the whole concept of this basket of analytics basket of stats to create our analytics is adjusted passer framework rating. Like, what is that? So you have to remember football is the most contingent on other players than all sports. We always hear football is the ultimate team game. The quarterback is the most contingent on the rest of his unit than any other position. And so what we've done is to try to create a basket of understandings. We'll go through all of it. It involves receivers, defenders, blitzing, pressure, time to throw, offensive blockers, a whole soup to show you pre-throw how the quarterback has been supported from the OC and his calls all the way to what's being done on the field just prior to the throw. And so the post-throw is totally different, but this will help you be able to create a context for your quarterback, if you're a Dolphins fan like us, our quarterback, how they're being supported. And so you could get a guy who's creating this kind of production, but if his framework is so good, it kind of lowers the value of it because he's being uplifted. Conversely, if you have a quarterback and his production's here and he's getting no support whatsoever, it adds more gravitas to those stats and that production. Did I do a good job there, Scott? What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
All right. I'm the big yap and he's the quiet guy, but he's a smart one. All right. So I'm going to go through it very quickly. Scott, just give us your basic overview of why you think this is valuable.
Yeah, well, I've been listening to you for, a while now, well over a year. And I know you've been talking a lot about offensive line, and your approach has been a little bit different than what we're seeing from Pro Football Focus or some of the other sites. And, it gets a little frustrating, I guess, when you see some of these sites that rank the Dolphins offensive line so high compared to what our eyes tell us. I mean, we watch these games, we see what happens, especially in crunch time where everything seems to fold. And, you're the thing that was different with your take versus theirs, they seem to be more interested in individual pass block rates and a lot of kind of subjective things. But what I like what you were putting around this was the context. And the context, to me, if the quarterback's walking up to the line of scrimmage, the important things he's looking at are how many receivers do I have going out for the pass versus how many guys they have covering, versus how fast do I have to get the ball out. And then the last piece is how much am I going to be under pressure trying to do this? And from what I saw, no one else seems to be accounting for that, especially the time to throw. All things aren't equal. And I think you were talking about that with the, two kids taking a test, and one's basic math and the other one's, algebra or whatever. They get the same score, but who really did better? And that's the big thing that seems to be missing from these offensive line ratings we're seeing. I mean, I think even right now, PFF has, I don't know what Miami's at. It was like 13th or 14th.
Yeah, 13th.
Yeah, which is, to me, absurdly high based on what we see. And I think what we're also starting to see is this situation is way too difficult, what we're asking the quarterback to do compared to any other team. When we start applying these same measurables to other teams, no one else is even close to what they're asked to do, especially no one who's good. No good team's doing this. And I think what we're also finding is that the league is starting to catch on to it, and we're getting diminishing returns now. I wish it was a more optimistic look at things, but right now it's not.
Well, I think the key, for what we're trying to do is to put the person looking at the stats in the shoes of the quarterback.
Chevy Swords, let's go.
And that's the key element. So if you look at our group, and this has been a process of Scott and I going back and forth for months, trying to find out what is the valuable stuff. He added the mathematical side to it, but he and I kept going back and forth saying, what's the important values towards this framework? And so I'm going to get into it specifically. I'm going to use film. I'm going to use images, just so you can understand, if unless you already do, what the framework of a quarterback is pre-throw. And the first thing, as Scott said, it's receivers and route, RIR. How many receivers are you matched up against defenders? So if you have 2 receivers against 7 guys in coverage, that's not as conducive as if you have 5 receivers in routes and you have 6 guys in coverage, because now they've blitzed that extra 1 and it's 5-on-5, and you got 5 guys blocking against their 5 rushers. And now you have 5 receivers, only 1 getting doubled by the 6 guys. Totally different. It allows the quarterback more options. It allows them to stress the secondary. And so that's the first thing that we're going to take a look at. And then blockers per pass. Really, I don't think it's blockers. It's men in the box at the time of snap. So if an OC is feeling like there's too much pressure, he'll call screens, he'll call play actions, he'll keep extra guys in to block. But what that does, it restricts the number one thing we talked about, receivers and route. The less receivers in routes, the worse the number matchups to the guys in coverage, the harder it is to get a pass off, especially in man coverage. And so that would be the second one. That has to do with the OC. What is he calling to offset his offensive line? Because he might not feel like the protection is there enough, so he has to call things up to boost it. Then the next is time to throw. Speed of throw, as an example, PFF has the true pass set grade, and that says, well, what is an offensive lineman doing when he's truly got a pass block on his own without all kinds of help? It immediately dismisses any throw less than 2 seconds. Why? Because a guy can't get there quick enough. And so if a guy can't get there quick enough in the first 2 seconds, how easy is that job for the offensive lineman? So we took into account time to throw, but then the pressure that the quarterback is experiencing, but we boosted that up. And through PFF, you could find the true pressure rating by reducing the amount of pressure, sacks, and all that stuff that the quarterback generates by his player failure. So we took the true pressure rating and married that with the time to throw to say, well, if you're throwing at 2 seconds and you're getting 20% pressure rating, that's not the same as if you're getting a 20% pressure rating at 2.5 seconds. That offensive line has blocked longer. They have given the quarterback more support. So we've worked this all together, and he'll break down the numbers that help you understand that when you're a quarterback, yeah, it's great to throw quick, but if you hold that football, the longer you hold it, the longer those receivers are in routes, and the more likely to break free from defenders. Football on the offensive and defensive side is a time seesaw. How long can the secondary cover compared to how long can the offensive line block or the pressure get them? The quicker the pressure gets to the quarterback, the easier job for the defenders. The longer the offensive line blocks, the more time those receivers have to get open, and it's harder on the defenders. So we took that into account. And the last is the blitz rate, the rate that somebody's being blitzed. So if you have 5 guys blocking and they're not blitzing at all, unsadly, like our Dolphins, that means all day long you're seeing 5 guys in true pass set versus 4. And then if you're adding the play actions and the screens and the extra blockers, you're seeing 5, 6, and 7 against 4. So if you're getting more blitzes, it puts more makes the job of the offensive line more difficult. But it also helps the quarterback, because if he's getting enough guys in routes, it allows him to get the hot route and to have a weakened secondary where he can attack. So the blitz it's actually, You want the blitz and to pick it up as a quarterback. If they're not blitzing and they're still getting a certain amount of pressure, that means they're getting pressure with their 4 while still having 7 out there. And so we worked all this in numerical statistical formula for positive and deleterious effects. And we'll get into that specifics in a minute. But first, I want to kind of show you, we graded out the Dolphins over the last few years, and you can kind of tell by your cats over there. You could tell by these numbers. It's not just offensive line. It plays a part. The offensive line sets the table because the OC looks at the offensive line and says, I believe they can block like this, and I don't need to call screens. I don't need to call play actions, and I can wait for my time to throw to rise to get guys open. As an example, if you compare San Fran to us, who we're supposed to emulate, San Fran has like a 2.6 time to throw, while ours is like 2.13 seconds. They're being blitzed at 30% blitz rate, and we're being blitzed at 13. And there's more factors that go into it, but you can see how there's a divergence between the two. So anyway, without getting further ado, this is the framework rating of the Dolphins from 2021. Now, Scott, take it off, man. Take it over and do your thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up too. One thing I like about the approach we're taking here, we're trying to take the subjective stuff out. So we're not doing it by any eye test, any film study. We're using the number. We're not even using PFF ratings. We're using the PFF raw data that they have. Clean time to throw was the thing we focused on for the quarterbacks.
And I missed the part. It was the true clean time to throw that we created. I forgot.
And so the clean time to throw up on PFF, that's supposedly how much time the quarterback has in the pocket before pressure starts to get in. And actually, for the 2 of this year, it's 2.01 is what the clean time to throw is, which is that would probably be the lowest of all.
It's 0.10 second more than what's needed for true pass set protection.
Yes, because and
every 10th, for those who don't understand, every 10th of a second is a long time in the NFL. The beats of 1/10 of a second is a substantial amount of time.
Yeah, so I haven't looked at everyone, obviously, but I got a feeling 2.01 is probably the fastest in history, and that's not a good thing. We're also the other
to the positive that you brought up, the fact we were able to get the depth of reception the last few years with the speed of throw talks about how amazing Hill, Waddle, and Tua were in that little framework.
Yeah, incredible. Someone, I think Warren Sharp was talking about that on Twitter. It was to that point, but we've been talking about this for a long time. Yeah, to get that quick time to throw, historically, one thing we're seeing looking at this, you always have to give something to get something as far as offensive line and offensive design, right? I want more time to throw. I need more blockers. If I do that, I got less men, in pass routes. You want more pressure on defense. If you're not getting it, you got to blitz, but that means less men. Everything is a give and take. Now, if you're a bad line like the Dolphins, sometimes what you give to get more, we're not getting as much as other teams are.
Returns.
Yes. It seems to be there's a certain point where we can't get any. We can have 9 guys blocking, 1 guy in a route, and we're still not going to get 3 seconds like a lot of other teams. That was another thing I noticed, the mitigating factors that we try to do, up the screens, up the play actions. It doesn't have the effect that it does with other teams.
No.
The other thing Curtis and I were talking about, we're seeing a trend in the league now. A lot of teams are copying what the Dolphins are doing. You look at Kansas City, they've reduced their time to throw. We're seeing Buffalo has moved it down
big time, which is surprising.
We even saw last week with Pittsburgh with Justin Fields, his clean time to throw. But what it looks to me is those teams aren't living in that. That is just another weapon.
It's one arrow in the quiver among many arrows.
Yeah, and you see for those teams, it changes game to game. I think I saw Justin Fields went from like 3 seconds game 1 clean time to throw. Then it was in the low 2s, 2-1 or 2-2.
Yeah.
So they're able to employ that as a game-to-game strategy depending on a lot of circumstances. But the Dolphins have decided they want to live in that world. And that might not be sustainable with what it looks like the league's doing to catch up to that.
No, and that's a thing too. If you really boil, for me, when you boil the football down, it's kabuki theater, show, but not really what's real, and borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And those two things together, you borrow from Peter to pay Paul, but you don't want the other team to know. You hide it, and then you catch them in that moment, and then you expose them. So you make them think it's run. It's really a pass. You overwhelm the secondary, and now you have the odds and the advantage, and you attack. And so, but you have to have a diverse weapon set. And that's one of the reasons why San Fran's so successful. They can run inside zone, they can run gap zone, they can run outside zone, they can run screens, they can run play actions, they can sit in the pocket for true pass set, they can flood the secondary with receivers. They can all do it pretty well, so they can attack a defense in many different ways, where we're kind of pigeonholed into 2 or 3 different facets. So,
and we're in the upside down as far as every other team I looked at. Screens thrown versus blitzes encountered, there's a relationship.
mm-hmm.
You know, most teams, if they're throwing a decent amount of screens, they're seeing a ton of blitzes. You know, almost every other team, maybe every other team, there are a lot more a lot more blitzes than screens. They might be blitzed 10 times and they throw 3 screens, 4 screens. The Dolphins are the only team in the league who have a lot more screens than blitzes. We're getting blitzed 2 or 3 times a game.
But that's totally unheard of.
Yes.
When you're getting blitzed, you throw your play actions and screens, and you speed up your time to throw to beat those blitzes and that pressure. But the pressure that we're trying to mitigate is just a 4-man rush for the most part. And that really hints back to the big failings of this offensive line.
Here's an example. Dolphins have thrown 22 screens this year. They've been blitzed 11 times, twice as many screens to blitzes.
It's crazy.
And, I mean, that's crazy. You look at I'm trying to come up with another team as an example. Buffalo, they've been blitzed 19 times. They've thrown 14 screens. Like, that's more of a normal ratio.
Yeah, totally. So if you can, just go over, because I don't want to go too long, just go over the Dolphins' last 4 years and some comparisons to some other teams. And then we'll go through the formula, how we kind of, not exactly, you know, because it gets too wordy and stuff, but the ideas of putting these numbers together.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off with the formula just roughly. The formula is based on a ratio of how many men they average in coverage versus how many men we send in routes. So it's that ratio. Obviously, you want closest to 1-to-1 is best. 1
receiver to 1 defender.
Right.
Anything less than that, 2 to 1, you know, then it's a negative effect for the environment.
Right. So the quarterback, from that, the worst. That's one factor we look at. We talk about this true clean time to throw. So what we're looking at now is we're looking at clean time to throw, but then we're also looking at how much they're under pressure, even with that clean time to throw. You know, generally in theory, the lower the time to throw, the lower the pressure.
Supposed to be. So yes.
And then we also, to make it even better, we backed out the pressures that are the quarterback's faults, because, you know, sometimes a quarterback just locks up or tries to move around and causes his own pressure. So we accounted for that. We applied that to the clean time to throw to get what we called a true clean time to throw, or adjusted clean time to throw. And then the other factor was how many guys are in coverage, and we looked at that based on how much are they blitzing. You know, all these things can be derived from the stats PFF's putting out there. So we got those factors together. Those 3 things make up the basis of how we're rating offensive lines.
Okay, so drum roll, please. Give us the Dolphins 2021 to now, so people can kind of think in your mind. And remember, this is not just the offensive line. It's the framework, the passing framework. Okay.
So a couple of things we saw was, looking back, 2021, 22, 23, 24.
Mm-hmm.
Most people agree that 21 was the worst line we've seen in
45th best offensive line in football. I dubbed it.
So using our scoring, so it's 0 to 100. And it kind of falls in line with the numbers you're used to. 70 would be about average.
Yeah.
So the 2021 line was a 49.6. Tons of pressures, no time to throw, million guys blocking. They didn't have to blitz to get to it. So that was as bad as it. That's the worst. Then 2022, we get a little bit better. We had to get to a 63.8. That was when we had Hunt and we had Connor, and we also had Armstead. We had him for a decent
even Shell, it wasn't half bad.
And they all played a decent amount of games. I think Hunt and Connor played almost all year.
Yeah, they did. They played all season.
Last year, what we would expect to see was a little bit of a drop back because we know Hunt missed a lot of time and Connor missed a lot of time and Armstead missed a lot of time. So it was down. So it went from a 63.8 down to last year was a 59.5. And then this year, it's about the same as it was last year so far, 59.7. But we really haven't faced a lot of really tough defenses yet. So, all Buffalo, but not knowing really what they are. But
so you gave me like Buffalo. You gave me
just so we applied it to some of the teams we're familiar with for different reasons. I just did a few, but comparison.
Remember, it's not offensive line. Offensive line is a healthy portion because it drives the rest of the framework, but it's all these disparate parts together into that pre-snap framework.
Yeah, the situation Frisco is giving, because that's kind of like our our evil twin or our cousin.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be designed like them, but it's vastly different, really, when you look at it. Frisco clean time to throw 2.64 compared to Miami's 2.01. I mean, that's a tremendous difference in football.
Yeah, huge. Half a second. That's like a lifetime in NFL throw.
And the amazing thing is, Frisco is having to do a lot less to make that happen. They've got less blockers per pass than we do, which means they got more men in routes than we do. They're getting blitzed a ton more, so they have less men in coverage. So all these factors and the pressures they are getting, about a quarter of them are the quarterback's fault, according to PFF. So the whole picture puts them in an 84.2 compared to our 59.7. So it's the big difference is that clean time to throw without them investing resources. We just seem to have to invest a lot more resources to keep our pressures reasonable. If we start doing 2.5 seconds to throw with a normal amount of receivers going out, you'd see our pressures probably go into the 40 or 50% range, which is, right now it seems like they try to keep it in the 20-25% range.
Well, we're averaging like 55% pass rush mitigation calls with play actions and screens. I think they're averaging 20%, and they're still able to hold that ball at 2.61 seconds. So when you compare it to us, it's a world of difference. They invite the pressure to take advantage of it, but they feel like they can block long enough and get enough guys in routes to beat it, and we can't. So I want, as somebody, who's trying to imagine this, you're a quarterback. You're at the line of scrimmage. You're calling out the mic. First thing you're worried about is who's blitzing, what's the pressure. Then the very next thing is, to play in your head, and you're trying to guess the coverage to figure out where the weaknesses are, how many guys are going to be in route compared to how many guys in coverage. Then the ball is snapped, and you've already got a predetermined time to throw window. It's pre-installed. The OC has said, my guys can block this long, so we're going to throw within that. And if we get out of that, it's going to be problematic. And so you're getting to that into your drop. You're reading the coverage. You're waiting to see if there's a blitz. You're seeing how many guys you got that are blocking for you and how successful that is. And then you're releasing that football. All the way up to that point, that framework has set the difficulty level for the quarterback. So a quarterback, as I said in the beginning, 5 blockers, taking 4 guys. You got 5 guys in routes against 7. That means 2 guys are double covered. Everybody else is manned up. Is single covered. And you're going to get at least single coverage someplace. But in the same token, when everybody's in the block, you got one guy going out the route, it's the most non-conducive. What options do you really have? It is very, very difficult. And so it's this kabuki theater, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. that drives the framework for a quarterback, from receivers and routes to blockers and to calls. And that's what our analytics is going to do. We're going to set it up week to week, show our Dolphin fans and other fans what kind of framework they have so they can see their quarterback, how they're producing in context, and see maybe, hey, you know what? My guy's being supported by the framework. I'm sure if you go look at Darnold beating San Fran this week, he had some amazing framework for him. But conversely, if you're a Dolphins fan, it's very clear. You can see the framework is not pass conducive, and it spreads to the whole thing. So I think that's going to be the whole deal. Don't want to go on too long. We'll get you the actual stats coming up soon.
Yeah, I did want to talk about one trend that I saw that's not good. And this is going back from Miami 2021, so last 4 years.
Yeah, it's a good one.
This was stunning. So here's how the league is starting to adapt to what's happening with the Dolphins. Blitz percentage. This is a percentage of the time that defense is blitzing us. 31% in 2021, 25% 2022, 22% last year. This year, 13%. So they're not blitzing anymore. And I'm also seeing that as a league-wide trend, that teams, when they're throwing faster, when Kansas City's trying to do it, even the Ravens, the other team, the counter seems to be, we're not going to blitz. And we're just going to put – so the difference between the Dolphins really this year and last year, they're blitzing like almost 10% less.
That's a big deal.
But we're still not sending any more receivers in routes. We're actually the same ratio last year. So we're sending about the same amount of receivers out, but we're seeing a lot more men in coverage. We're throwing it about as fast as last year, a little faster. We're getting a little bit less pressures than last year, but that's only because they're not blitzing now. So our pressure percentage, and that's the kind of stats that PFF and some other people will grab onto. They'll be like, well, Tua is only under pressure, 15% of the time or whatever. It's a very low amount. That should be great. But it's not when you consider what we're having to go through to keep it that low. Because as soon as we move some of those other numbers, we put another receiver in pass routes, you'll see the pressures go through the roof.
Yep. Right? It means the difference between the one end of the spectrum, max protected one receiver is ultra conservative. And then if you get to the other side with 5 wide receivers and 5 guys, it's ultra aggressive. But we're a pass-first team that's invested all our assets in the passing game, yet we are ultra conservative, one of the most conservative teams in the league. Outside of the depth of target, the whole framework is ultra conservative.
Yeah, from a protection standpoint, they're probably the most conservative team in the entire league when you count the blockers, the screens, the play actions.
And that leads to the receivers and route.
We're setting up like a little ball team, but they won't play big ball.
It's incongruent.
And look, I get it. You and I talked about this when they started with this. It was like, as football, fans for a long time. I'm from the, fan since the 70s. It's always interesting when people try to challenge the rules of football. And we were talking about this almost like McDaniels deciding, I'm going to break the rules of the Matrix. You remember the Matrix? The Matrix has rules. Well, what happens when we start challenging these rules? What's the fastest a pass rusher can get there, which I think about 2.2. I think Myles Garrett. So, right. So
it was a total screw up.
Right. So if we can throw faster than 2.2 consistently and not get pressure, then we can do what we're going to do before they get to us, that's the theory they're challenging. Yep. How fast can we move the slider down to faster throws and still be able to get the ball down the field? Now, this year, the other thing has changed. The last 2 years, you see that depth of targets gone way down to – it was great 2 years ago. It was like tops in the league. It
was unbelievable. 2022 was one of the best seasons, I think, ever for that short window. Depth of target and speed of throw. It was great. Insane.
And then last year, it got moved down pretty dramatically. And I think this year, it's got to be even worse with all these screens, probably in the 6s.
I don't know. I think I got to check.
Yeah, so this trend is just going – a lot of these things are going in the wrong direction. And, right now the league's made their adjustment. So the question is, what can Miami do to make their adjustment? But like you and I talked about, we might not have the horses to even make the right kind of adjustment. If we don't have the offensive linemen to do what we need to do, play
And even the blocking tight ends. There's a whole soup. It's not just the offensive line. It's the team. It's the mold. It's the projection of whatever philosophy you're trying to do. We're designed for the fun ball era of 5 years ago and maybe the early 2000s, but that's not the way it is right now. And I said this a couple years ago, it's pass balance. It's about winning key situations, keeping your defense fresh to keep you in the game. And that demands time of possession. It demands running the ball inside. So occasionally they crunch the leverage in the box, or maybe they bring a little bit of a big look, and then you dial up the audible, you dial up the right call and take advantage and put those key points on. It's not just blow teams out by putting 40 points on it.
Yeah, just make something come to mind too. Then it's something that none of these analytics can cover. It is, you could have doing this smoke and mirrors thing the Dolphins are doing. You could have these great stats and even good scores, with the ratings and grades and all that. But fourth quarter, down by 2 points, 4th and 9 at midfield, the game's on the line. I'd like to see what the numbers look like, what their success rates are in those cases, as far as the pressure rate, time to pass. I would bet you they're terrible. And that's what it really comes down to. In those key moments when there's no more tricks, no play action, no screens, no quick throws, then how good are you? And the problem is you can't avoid those situations, especially if you want to get anywhere. You're going to be in those in a Super Bowl run, multiple times in a playoff run.
Yeah.
And then the shell game gets exposed.
That's it. That's a good point. Very, very true. All right, so you guys got it. We'll expand on it some more. We'll get you the grade starting tonight with the Jets versus the Patriots and try to flesh this thing out. We're going to obviously keep our minds open to whatever you guys have to say, how we can improve it. But I really do think this will play out pretty well. So let us know what you think. Be kind and help us get this thing right, because it will really help all fans of football. And I think that contextual evaluations are the key. And I do think, even though it's mine, and I got to say it's fantastic, I do think it's fantastic. And Scott, you've been critical through all this. I'm very grateful to have been doing this with you. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed. It's Curtis saying, and Scott, Curtis and Scott saying, be well, go Phins. Curtis and Scott out. Start building your own online sports book today by getting signed up with aceperhead.com service that'll allow you to book action on sports from all around the world.